Hello out there in cryptocurrency land. Welcome back to Real Crypto, where we take the market one leg at a time while keeping the market cycle in mind. And right now, the market cycle is still bearish. We have failed to break several key levels all over the place. And while a handful of smaller altcoins have made spectacular runs recently, it's ever since yesterday, it's been very difficult to trade these markets. So let's get to some analysis. We're going to look at Bitcoin, we're going to look at Ethereum, and some of the other top altcoins. So first off, we have Bitcoin right here forming a possible compounded head and shoulders pattern. You have two shoulders here, a head right here, one shoulder here, and a potential second shoulder forming over here. And if you guys remember a while back, we were trying to look for a base for this to set up to break the 5,800 level. And we actually may be setting up to do that irregardless of this inverted head and shoulders pattern. Let me show you the exact pattern we were looking at last time around. And that's this pattern right here. So we have, let's go over to this pattern. And what we have here is a swift downtrend and then the basing action right here. And if you don't know where this is pretty much right where we broke this trend line that everyone was watching for so long. Very well defined on Coinbase and others that look a little bit differently. But this is the line that we failed to break for about 6 months. And then finally we came back down and tested this line a third time. And we actually had this trend line drawn. You could have drawn it based off those 2-3 points here, and we did, and bounced right off of that. Very technical, and bounced off of it, formed a bear flag. You know, I was reading as a bear flag just like that. But if you look at it in another fashion, it kind of looks like a compound inverted head and shoulders, doesn't it? You've got a shoulder here, potential shoulder here, shoulder here, shoulder here, potential shoulder here. And then you have a neckline like this, and you can see the neckline never really gets going, and then it kind of fails, tests the highs a few more times. And then if you guys really remember, so here's a couple more little technical things for you. So here's a trend line, those members of the Power Hour. Remember, I think it was yesterday, maybe the day before, where I was talking about how trend lines, even angled trend lines, can become support and then become resistance. This is a perfect example of that. So we have a low, a trend line here, the trend line's broken, becomes resistance again, and then you see the rollover. So a number of technical factors happening here, and in Bitcoin it looks like we're right here in the cycle. We'll look at that in a minute. And so you've got Bitcoin failing to break out, and the breakout was on good volume, and we just had something similar happen yesterday. The break of the no, that was Ethereum, excuse me. So we have Bitcoin try to break out of this inverted head and shoulders pattern, have a nice little base, and then try to go higher on much lower volume, and then it rolls over and then rolls over again. If you guys recall, I had a video out right about here, right towards the tip of this, I think very shortly before it broke out, about we're going to go in either direction, and we could have gone in either direction. We just ended up going lower. This is a bear market. While I wanted to call it lower, I wasn't trying to sound smart or anything. Everyone needs to make their own decisions while you're trading, to be quite frank with you, but you can see right here this overall bear flag, failed inverted head and shoulders with a low symmetrical triangle, failed on pretty high fashion right there. So what we have right now is something extremely similar to that. So we have here a compound inverted head and shoulders, and let me remove these to kind of get your bias out of the way. Okay, and either way, here's your neckline. We actually have a failure to break out right here. And at first we were talking about 6,500 being the line of resistance, and I was wrong on that. I should have given it the full breadth up here to this high, because you can see it's failed here 3 times. As of this failure, we did amend that to this level, and right here you would not have gotten involved due to that fact. And subsequently breaking down here right now as I'm recording this video, you can draw a very similar trend line here. The question you have to ask yourself is, does this break us lower, or does this imply more choppy action? I kind of think it implies more choppy action. This looks very, very similar to this base that we just went through over here. And you know, if you view this big trend line as this same big trend line here, we're repeating almost the exact same pattern. I say almost because it's not exact, but if you take this horizontally here, you can see we tried to throw up twice and failed, went down, came back, and we still may do that again, and then failing again. So either we fail here, or we'll do another round of round of upside movement before that failure. And you see the volume on this breakdown isn't necessarily that aggressive. We've seen much higher volume on previous failures, and this one not so much. This one 6 minutes until this 2-hour candle closes. It's going to be a pretty muted candle from a volumes perspective. So I would expect more choppiness probably throughout the weekend, and then we'll see what happens after that. Maybe it does the exact same pattern. Maybe it forms a different pattern. But I guess if you really wanted to, you could probably try to force a bear flag here. But very similar pattern in Bitcoin. You know, we were looking for maybe a breakout out of a multiple inverted head and shoulders. We were talking about a right shoulder yesterday in the power hour, and it looks like we're getting that. And so I just want to point that out to you. The rhyming with the previous pattern with what's happening now, both consolidating in a fashion to break this ultimate trend line in Bitcoin. And that's what we talked about. I mean, even before we actually formed this base right here. I think it was right here or right here. I don't recall. But what we discussed here, guys, in on the Real Crypto channel was that we're going to form a base. I don't know what fashion it's going to take shape. I don't know what it's going to do, but we have to form a base down here if we're going to break this. Now, does that completely negate the fact that we could move higher? No, it does not. You know, everything is possible in trading, and one more move to the upside could be perfectly healthy. And I have a line here at about 7,200, which happens to coincide with a number of factors. The fact that we've come down about 15% in these prior highs, which we've discussed, as well as a 50% retracement of this move, is just under 7,200. I have this just over 7,200, so about 7,200, give or take. Right? You're never going to hit the level on the head exactly, but you know, somewhere around the 7,200 level we could rally up to before ultimately failing over. And if we rallied, we don't need much of a consolidation to break lower. If we're to break lower here, you know, we probably would need a little bit more of a consolidation. And it looks like we're about to get that based on this downside candle here. So let's take a look at Ethereum yesterday, which gave us some mixed signals. Thanks, Ethereum. First of all, I want to give you guys the big picture of Ethereum. Let's go to the daily chart. So there's the daily chart of Ethereum. You can see we've come down a significant amount from the highs. We've broken pretty much every level of support and had a nice bounce over here. The question you have to ask yourself is this a dead cat bounce, or is this actually a possible bottom and we move higher? And let's kind of walk through those scenarios. So first things first, our most recent level of resistance, which was support, is going to be right here at the 360, 350 level. You can see we bounced off it here twice, and we undercut it here quite significantly. We can rally into that 363 level and still be well in this bear market without it having a chance of rallying higher. Anyone that's telling you that Ethereum is bottomed here is basically guessing. There's no way of knowing. Until we clear this level of resistance, Ethereum is still in an overall downtrend. But, you know, we were trying to play this for a nice bounce here up, you know, 15, 20%. Nothing wrong with that. So let's zoom in here. Most recently, we do have a very high volume candle at the lows with a nice little hammer candle up here. If you back out, it is a pretty good volume candle. We do have higher volume throughout Ethereum history. We are capable of higher volumes, but that's a good one. But it doesn't necessarily mean that this is capitulation in Ethereum. What it means is it's a pretty good volume candle, and it could cause a nice bounce, and it has caused a nice bounce. You see a lot of altcoins bouncing a tremendous amount. This one bouncing about 26%. That's not an abnormal bounce. Just like if you were to look for a decline in a bull run, you're looking for, you know, preferably less than a 33% decline for it to continue higher. You know, here you have the inverse situation. You're getting less than a 33% bounce for a potential continuation to the downside. So digging down even deeper than that, you can see here we have a high volume selling candle and then another high-ish volume buying candle. So let's go to the 2-hour chart and see what's what. Well, what we've been talking about is the 305 level being a major level of resistance, and we broke higher on that yesterday on pretty decent volume here. Subsequently failing, pulling back in low volume is not a sell signal, so if you got in here, that's fine, and then pulling back below here, you're wondering what to do. Now you have a high volume sell candle breaking this trend line that we've been tracking, and what do? Do you sell Ethereum here? Do you give it more space? Well, that's a money management question and a question for your guys' rules. But overall here, I think that, you know, Ethereum is showing the general lack of strength in the market. Whether we tank immediately from here or go sideways for a few more days, that's yet to be seen. No one can really tell that just off of a medium grade 2-hour candle. But what it does tell you is that this upside run probably has paused and is due a consolidation. And that is generally what you see in bear markets. Now, notice another thing. Ethereum rose up to the point where it broke down from. Perfectly healthy action. Perfectly healthy action. You see this time and time again. Not so much as of late in Ethereum because of the extreme bearish nature, but in a lot of coins, here's a situation where it rallied to the breakdown point and then failed to go lower. It did subsequently rally, but is what it is right there. And then you can see here's a scenario where here's a breakdown, rallied to the breakdown point and failed. Here's a breakdown point, never rallied back to. It tried to consolidate for a long time, got pretty close though. All the way up here, it got pretty close and then failed again. Here's a breakdown point. So a lot of these breakdown points can be places where price naturally rallies to and then fails at. While 305 was a resistance point, this was a breakdown rally point, and subsequently finding resistance there and rolling over. And taking a look at Litecoin here, you can see we have pretty much a bear flag, and Ethereum looks a lot like this too, but I haven't really called Ethereum a bear flag, but definitely in a rising channel here in Litecoin. We can go back to Ethereum and draw the exact same shape for you there. Typically rising flags are bearish, and while we would like the market to get going again, it doesn't necessarily look like that's necessarily in the cards at this moment in time, but any of these patterns can be negated by a higher low and then reversing higher. But the altcoins bouncing into resistance points and even past resistance points doesn't necessarily lead us to super bullish markets. So let's take a look at some other ones here. I'm just kind of clicking around, ladies and gentlemen. Cardano one recently that had some pretty good volume at the bottom with volume matched here at the top. So that doesn't necessarily lead us to bottoming volume. This actually could be a lot of selling as we're rising higher here in Cardano. As people pile into these coins, you see that a lot. You'll see a lot of volume here towards the top. Here's another one, IOTA, with a lot of volume towards the top. We've got Tron over here with very similar action. You can see we had the volume there at the low. The low volume area is here. Nice little bottoming candle. And then subsequently, a lot of volume here towards the top and rounding over. Not such a healthy thing. You're going to see these trend lines all over the place. These need to be supported and respected going forward. Otherwise, the market's just gonna cave. And so there's a trend line right there for Tron, recently bouncing off of it. So it needs to maintain that for this current trend. If it breaks this, then we're going to wait for basing action and see what happens there in Tron. Taking a look at Ethereum Classic, we have a little symmetrical triangle formed above this point right here. So Ethereum Classic also showing some major volume up here, but actually this is some bottoming volume right there in Ethereum Classic. But showing a symmetrical triangle, we'll have to see what happens from there. XMR looking pretty good. One of the only coin on my screen that's green. This is BLX. This is a kind of a derivative of Bitcoin just for pricing. It's not a tradable asset. But you've got XMR right here putting in a pretty big topping candle in the previous 2-hour bar, also having its trend line that it's respecting. And a lot of these coins have a similar trend line that they're respecting and that need to hold. Otherwise, this bear market is, this little bull jump here, this rally is in quite a bit of trouble. We got Dish right here. Looks like it's already trying to break that uptrend. You've got BNB against the US dollar. Looks like that's already broken its uptrend right there. NEM, inverted head and shoulders neckline break. You can see all the selling after that, increased selling pressure on NEM. If NEM's not going to rally, nothing's going to rally. Because if NEM rallies, everything's going to rally because NEM's like one of those super weak coins. Zcash breaking its trend line there. Volume not really aggressive though. Omise Go kind of rolling over as well. After it comes back and touched the $4.50 level, guys, we've been really looking at this $7.50 level up here in Omise Go. Kind of is a level of support, and we're well beneath that now. Well beneath that now. We got all the way down into the low threes, 3.25, before finally pulling back. And next on my list are the two ones that have moved the most in this market, VeChain and then Nano. You can see VeChain with a tremendous amount of volume right here on this topping candle, and that has put the top in for us, and probably that top will be the top for quite some time. Currently, we're pulling back into the prior base, and so far holding that level is bullish. But again, here's one trend line in V chain that we've been looking at, and this trend line looks like there's no other trend line right now. If you want to call this a trend line, we'll have to wait and see what happens with that. But V chain pulling back into the breakout point of this base is healthy. The volume here isn't too bad. Good amount of accumulation. This kind of reminds me a little bit of EOS early in its bigger run. Remember with the mainnet launch. So we'll have to see if we get some support here, and we can round out. That would be healthier. Maintaining this trend line would be healthier. And then Nano as well. Here's the trend line for Nano. You can see it's actually already been tested once. Looks like it's being tested again, and so we'll have to see how that plays out in Nano. But those are the two biggest ones, and those are your top 20 cryptocurrencies right now, ladies and gentlemen. That's all of them. And overall, they're not looking great. We had a nice rally. We need to see what's next to come. And if that big pattern in Bitcoin plays out just like it did before over here, we'll have to see what happens to the alts at that point in time. All right, ladies and gentlemen, that's pretty much all I got for you. So stay safe out there. If you guys are trading, keep in mind we're probably going into a much more choppier situation than we have been the past couple of days with pretty big bull trends in the markets. We're probably going to go back into some very sideways trading, so please stay safe out there. Respect your stops. Take profits when you got them, and I'll see you guys next time.